Hello and welcome to a new lesson. What is poetry? In this lesson, we will talk about meaning of poetry, definitions of poetry, functions of poetry, and questions. This is lecture 1. Let's talk about the topic. The first one is meaning of poetry. Poetry comes from ancient Greek poio, meaning I create or I make. We have the next point. Poetry is a form of art in which human language is used for its aesthetic qualities. Aesthetic qualities means the quality of beauty, the quality of refinement, the quality of being so attractive and so appealing to the heart and mind. So poetry is an art in which language is decorated for the purpose of attaining aesthetic goals. That is the point here. We have the next point. It uses condensed or compressed form to convey emotions or ideas. In poetry, normally we use condensed or compressed, that is to say, compact, in short, in brief. In fact, we try to express our emotions and feelings in poetry in a fewer words. That is the point here. We have the next point. Poetry achieves its musical effects through literary devices. And music or musical effect is very important in poetry. And this is done through various figures of speech such as simile, metaphor, hyperbole, and so on. Later we can take up that aspect of discussion separately. Then we have this point. The most vital element of sound in poetry is rhythm. Rhythm is very important. In fact, it is the rhythm that makes poetry musical and melodious. Loving to listen, sweet to listen. That is the point of discussion here. So this is in brief a glimpse of what is the meaning of poetry. What is the literal interpretation of poetry? Do you really want to know what are properties of language? Here is a great chance for you to learn. The lesson is designed in such a way that learners feel highly motivated to know each of the properties of language. The first one is displacement. The second one is arbitrariness. The third one is productivity. The fourth one is cultural transmission. The fifth one is discreteness. And the sixth one is duality. The link for this lecture is given in the description. Now we move on to the next aspect of our discussion, definitions of poetry. According to Concise Oxford Dictionary, and it defines poetry as the elevated expression of elevated thoughts or feelings in metrical form. Here the word elevated is very important. Elevated means highest form of expression. Poetry is not only the highest form of expression, but also the highest form of thoughts and feelings, which is composed, which is dressed in metrical form, in musical form, in rhythmical form, in melodious form, in sonorous way. That is the explanation of this definition. We have one more definition. A.E.Houseman describes poetry is not the thing said, but a way of saying it. According to this poet, poetry is not about the idea only, is not about the thought only, but a way of expressing that idea, but way of expressing that thought, but way of saying it in a unique way that makes poetry different from the rest. Look, human qualities are universal, like love, like hate, like anger, like death, like sorrow. But way of expressing those human qualities differ from person to person, from poet to poet. And if we have the best way of saying it, expressing those human emotions, that is all about. That what makes poetry different from the rest. That is the point here. We have one more definition in this respect. William Hazlitt says, poetry is the language of the imagination and the passions. Poetry decorates your language. It expresses your emotion and passions in a beautiful way. In prose, normally you express your ideas. That is straightforward. They are straightforward and easy to understand. But the same idea, if you express in poetry, it appeals to the mind and the heart. Therefore, we say poetry is the language of the imagination and the passions. It comes out from the depth of your feelings, and it is really very fascinating. And the last definition is William Wordsworth defines poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. Poetry is the spontaneous overflow, natural overflow. Somebody cannot make poetry happen. Somebody cannot force you to write poetry. It must happen automatically, naturally, spontaneously, with the help of your powerful feelings, with the help of your obsession with ideas, and later you can recollect them in tranquility when you are at peace, when you are at ease with yourself. It's not that with an impulse you can express something, you can express your ideas. Impulsive expression of ideas is not poetry. So poetry, according to William Wordsworth, is about your experience of expressing it spontaneously with the help of powerful feelings towards something that must be recollected in peace, in tranquility, when you are at ease with yourself. That is the point here. Now we move on to the next section of our discussion, that is functions of poetry. In other words, we can say, why do we read poetry? In what way does poetry help us, enrich us, make us knowledgeable? The first point in this direction is we read poetry to become wiser from the richness of imagination of others. Nothing more difficult to explain. It's very simple, it's straightforward. If I read poetry, our ideas become richer, we become wiser by going through what great poets have expressed in the form of poetry. We have the next point. Poetry deepens our association towards beauty, love, sorrow, death, and nature. If you read poetry, you develop a sort of association, a sort of relationship, a sort of different outlook towards your understanding of what is beauty, what is love, what is sorrow, what is death, and what is nature. Beauty is not only what we see. Beauty can also be about the inner aspect, inner quality of your thought. So when you read poetry, you can go deep into what beauty is all about. Likewise, love, sorrow, death, and nature. Let's see, we can have some more ideas linked to this aspect of study, this aspect of discussion, this aspect of idea. Aristotle says poetry is finer and more philosophical than history, for poetry expresses the universal and history only the particular. So according to Aristotle, poetry is more beautiful, much finer, more melodious, more appealing, more soothing. It is also more philosophical. It has more depth in terms of meaning and message than history, because poetry expresses the universality of human emotions, while history talks about the achievement, success, and defeat of a particular persons at a particular point of time. So Aristotle differentiates between what is poetry and what is history. We continue. William Wordsworth deepens in us the love for nature. When you read the poetry of William Wordsworth, you will start having a different interpretation of what is nature, a different outlook towards nature, what nature is all about. Because of William Wordsworth is considered to be the prophet of nature. His entire poetry revolves around nature. So reading poetry of William Wordsworth will deepen in us a different outlook toward appreciating, understanding, and feeling nature. I hope you get my ideas. Likewise, John Keats reflects in us the love for beauty. As he says in one of his poems, a thing of beauty is a joy forever. So the poetry of John Keats moves around the central idea of beauty. When you read the poetry of John Keats, it helps you develop a different outlook towards what really beauty is all about. Likewise, Lord Tennyson intensifies in us the need for a spiritual value. When we read the poetry of Lord Tennyson, it helps us in appreciating the need and the power of spiritual values in our life. So these are the most important functions of poetry. In what way we are being enriched by our habit of reading poetry, and how reading of poetry helps shape our understanding of the world, of the nature, of life, of beauty, of love, and so on. We move to our next aspect of discussion, that is evaluation. Questions. Question number 1. Explain briefly what do you mean by poetry. Question number 2. Explain in detail what makes the art of poetry more effective and appealing. Question number 3. Write any 2 definitions of poetry you like most. Question number 4. Why do you read poetry? Explain your views in detail. That is, here I'm talking about functions of poetry. We continue about question number 5. Write true or false. Look at the question. The word poetry comes from a Greek word poio, which means I destroy. Is it true or false? Check out your answer. It's false. Next, language is used in a compressed form in poetry. Check out your answer. True. Rhythm is not vital to poetry. False. Poetry achieves its musical effect through literary devices. True. The poetry is not about high thoughts and feelings. False. The language of poetry is arranged in metrical forms. True. We have some more questions related to this. Right, true or false? According to A.E.Houseman, poetry is more about a way of saying it. True. Poetry is the language of the imagination and the passions. True. Reading of poetry does not make us wiser. False. Poetry helps us appreciate the meaning of love and beauty. True. Poetry of William Wordsworth deepens in us love for nature. True. Poetry of John Keats does not talk about beauty. False. And the last point is, poetry of Lord Tennyson intensifies in us the need for spiritual values. True. These are some of the selected questions about true and false. Hope you understand the concept. Thank you and goodbye.